Welcome to the SMY podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Bader. I hope you're all having a great day. It's report card season. In our last episode, we dived into the nuances of the report card that the Wisconsin Department of Instruction releases about schools. Today, we're talking about student report cards, specifically elementary school report cards, because they're changing. How and why would a report card change? Good question. That's what we'll talk about today. Culturally, we associate report cards with letter grades, A minus, B, etc. Get an A or B and you're doing well. B minus or C, there might be some issues. D's and F's indicate problems. Pretty clear markers, but not very informative, and not really how we assess how elementary students are doing, nor how we, in today's modern education, use report cards at all. Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Christie Gajewski is joining us today to talk about the changes South Milwaukee elementary parents will see in the language on the report cards. And they're not really cards anymore either. Haven't been for a long time, are they? Christie, welcome back to the SMY podcast.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us, what did we have? What were the report cards before this change?
So for the last several years, the report cards haven't been letter grades. So that's not changing. We don't have the A, B, C, D, E, F, A, B, C, D, F on the elementary report cards. That has been the same for several years, where we instead are talking about student goals and growth in terms of exceeds expectations, meets expectations, approaches expectations, and below expectations, or it's something that's just not assessed during that particular grading period. Additionally, what was the report cards used to have were these very lengthy narratives on how your students were doing. And it could be pretty tedious to read it all. And it also made the report card itself very, very long. And what we have tried to do is try to make that a little easier to read for families.
I have to say, I said there aren't report cards anymore. I just remembered that when I was in elementary school, first and second grade, and I guess this might date me, but it literally was a card that got sent back and that was filled in again the next semester by the teacher in letter grade form. It was so small that all they could put on there were letters, really. And then I guess you would get parent-teacher conference or whatever and talk about it. So what led to the change this year?
Well, part of it is that we've been getting feedback for a couple of years that it was really hard for families and parents to understand what was going on with their kids just through the narratives. And, if we think about the families who speak other languages, it wasn't easily something that we could translate into another language for a primary home language. So we wanted it to be something that was much more clear for the teachers and clear for the students and clear for the families. So the biggest change is that we've tried to align it to our state standards. And you've heard me talk about the state standards and things like that when we've talked about our state report card and things like that. That's one of the things. The Ford exam that we have to take every year assesses kids on their growth on the state standards. And so we're not trying to teach to the test, but those standards are just like any profession has a set of standards, whether it's like building code in the construction industry, education, we have standards that help us provide markers for what kids should know and be able to do at a certain time. And so that's what we're trying to translate onto the report card, is the set of specific skills that kids need to be able to do by the end of a school year, as kind of aligning with the standards. So we're trying to get everything to kind of be in alignment. So we're not necessarily, there's definitely room for the fun stuff still that teachers do and the magic they make happen, especially around the holidays. But there's also specific criteria that we have to follow. And that's what we're trying to put on the report cards, those big overarching skills that we know kids need to be able to grow toward by the end of the school year. And so that's what we're putting on the report card. The biggest change on the report card is that the skills are listed versus a very long narrative, especially in reading, to tell you what they're doing really well and where there are areas for growth. Now it's just the list of skills. And if you'll know if it's an area of growth, if it says approaching or below expectations. And then the teachers will write some comments about some things that kids can do at home to help support the growth in those areas. But that's the biggest change. The biggest change right now is just in reading. We're trying to make sure that is clearly aligned. And then eventually you might see some adjustments and changes in life skills and writing, in speaking and listening. Those things, we've all just kind of tried to lay those out so it's very clear what kids are working on.
Are we kind of pioneers on this, or are we kind of borrowing this from other districts, or how did this come about?
So I think that the South Milwaukee was on this journey when I got here about 4 years ago, but because of the pandemic and a variety of other reasons, this report card just kind of stayed this way for a while. Standards aligned or evidence-based reporting is not new. A lot of districts around us are moving toward that, especially at the elementary level. It's a lot easier to explain what kids are growing toward at the elementary level. It gets a little more complicated middle school and high school. So we've continued more traditional grading structures there. And honestly, what the grade means is actually more important than just the letter on the grade itself, or the letter on the report card itself. We want to make sure that our teachers understand what goes behind those grades, that it's about learning and growth and not just completing a set of work, a percentage of set of work. So we're working on all those things, and it is not new. A majority of the districts around us have started moving in this direction in the last 7 to 10 years.
Okay. And then, so you shared a sample with me, and I guess we kind of explained this in the letter too, but there's some really interesting, so there's a life skills section, which are kind of I guess, values that we're teaching: respect, responsibility, perseverance. A lot of it is comments. The details come first, and then the comments come after.
Yes.
It looks like that's a big change.
Yep.
And then and I guess this kind of gets into assessment, right? So, writes for reading or for writing, I'm sorry, it says writes informational text.
Yep.
And so when you're saying you're aligning kind of those things, does that mean that every second grade teacher would know, what that means, like writes, and have those same standards as to what that means?
Yes.
That they can write an informative text?
Yep.
Got it. And then it goes through kind of those language arts, right? Speaking and listening.
Yep.
Language. I guess it's all the classes and the breakout classes that the kids have.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we're starting to get more and more detailed in all of the different subject areas, the more and more that we identify and prioritize those big, heavy, those big skills that all kids need to be able to have and be able to do. So, right now, some of it is still topic based, like in math, it's like addition and subtraction. There's actually more skills that's just the topic. That's what they're covering. That's what they're learning is addition and subtraction. But there's a lot more skills and things like that will eventually be listed in those areas as well. But right now, we just started with our reading and reading language arts pieces because we wanted to make sure that we're following suit with the changes at the state level to what's expected for teaching reading and teaching literacy moving forward. So that was why we focused on that area first, to try to make sure we're listing all those skills, that it's very clear. I know some of our families have been following that legislation and have been following different pieces about our reading instruction and things like that. And we wanted to make sure that we were very clear that we are following what we're supposed to be following, and that we're trying to be aligned in all 4 of our elementary schools with some of the approaches and the things that we're doing with our kids.
And then, so we've already kind of had parent teacher night, right? Yep. So what happens after a report card comes out, right?
Well, I think we schedule a report card, or the parent teacher conferences kind of halfway through, so you can kind of see where your student is at, and how you can help push them forward by the time they get a report card grade. So report cards for elementary students will be sent electronically or available electronically. I think it's the second week of December. I can't remember the exact date, But then this usually communication goes home that says that they're ready to be viewed, and you can log into Infinite Campus and see your child's grades. And then at any point, if you had questions about that kind of thing, you would connect with your child's teacher just to see how they're doing. And then, and then we just keep going, and we kind of do that again, second trimester, and then third trimester, they'll get the end of the year report card.
Got it. So, yeah, so I guess parents should take away when they read this that it's either time they should have heard a little bit if we're struggling to meet those expectations already, but if they wanted to, this should kind of be another warning sign if it gets home.
And one of the key things to understand about the change, especially in reading and literacy, is that a majority of the standards are supposed to be met by the end of the year. So one of the things that I think growing up, we were all expected, we want A's and B's on our report card. We got rewarded for A's and B's, or at least I did, A's and B's for our report cards. But when we're going through something that is like a year-long process, what's actually good is not necessarily that they're meeting the expectation by the end of the first trimester. You want them meeting or exceeding by the end of the year, and approaching is good when we get to this time of year. Approaching expectations is good. That means they're close, and they just need to continue to practice and do the things that they're doing in class, and they should be able to kind of get over that hump by the end of the school year. So you might see a lot of approaching expectations on your child's report card, and that's actually okay.
I see. So these aren't the standards for at this point in the year.
Right.
These are for the standards for the whole year where a student would be at. I see. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so I guess, does that mean, what if they exceed expectations in every category?
Then that's a good question. If they're exceeding expectations in that category, that means that there's going to be an opportunity for teachers to extend the learning and push them forward on some things that might be more like for the next grade level standards. So the teachers will work with our advanced learning coordinator, and will often either have them in small groups with the advanced learning coordinator, or we'll sometimes also work with that advanced learning teacher, to kind of like coordinate some ideas and some stretch activities and things like that. So they can continue to exceed, and that's amazing. But the teachers differentiate enough to know that if they are exceeding at that point of the school year, then they're going to challenge them throughout the school year.
I see. And then, does any of this go out by paper anymore? Do people get it that way?
No, we've been just primarily doing electronic at this point, just because it is a lot of paper. And many families have multiple children in the school. So it's much easier to log into Infinite Campus to be able to see your children's report cards that way. And I would recommend that if a parent or a guardian does not have access yet, that they connect with the school, because then they will be able to make sure that they have the codes and everything that they need to be able to log in and see the report cards.
So, and I guess it's important from, my office and the principal's office to let people know that they're out, that it's time to look at them, because I know ours don't come home in the backpacks anymore either. And I know, at least for my middle schooler, that's a good thing, because I'm never sure what's coming, what gets there or what doesn't get there.
Or you find it 6 weeks later crunched up on the bottom of your child's backpack. I don't know. My kid, that was where I always found it.
Yeah. And then I guess also, if you don't speak English as your primary language at home, whatever you're looking at it, and might even translate it before you even get it. I don't remember if Infinite Campus has a language selection. I guess I just blow right past that when I log in. But and I suppose if someone needed a translator, needed to discuss in their language, they could come into one of the schools and have a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. We would be able to, utilize some of the tools that we have to help have discussions around that if there's concerns and we need a different language, for sure.
Now, do all students get the same report card, regardless of if they were an ESL student or if they have special needs or anything like that?
Yeah, everybody gets the same report card. If your child has indicated needs through an IEP, the scoring might look a little different. But for I mean, those are typically students with the most significant needs. They're actually assessed on slightly different standards than a majority of our students. But everyone will get the same report card. And usually at that time, if your child has a language need or has a special education need, the special education teacher or English language teacher, the ESL teacher, will also include a progress report on their specific goals. So they won't see their IEP goals perhaps in the report card, but they will give progress toward those goals so that you can we're trying to make sure that those are all aligned pieces as well. So the skills that they're kind of trying to work on in special education are going to lead to hopefully improved outcomes on the regular school report card too.
Sure. And you've tried to give parents a heads up about this already,
Yes.
right? About the changes coming?
Yeah.
So there's a letter sent home.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Christie Gajewski, thank you for filling us in on these changes to report card. I guess if anybody has questions about that, they should contact their school, their principal, or their teacher and just ask your questions, and we'll see if we can't get those answered.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SMY podcast. I hope you found it interesting. I did. I love the fact that we can see what the core competencies are that we expect our kids to be learning. And that kind of lets us be able to track kind of what the teacher's doing and making sense of the homework. So I hope that was useful. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time.